What acts to follow? Gee. Compassion and passion. It was wonderful. This is a talk about ritual healing. I chose that term because it's a little bit more ecumenical. And basically it's going to be in 4 sections: placebo senses, ritual versus hospital, lessons learned, and proposed implementation. It's going to be a little bit practical in a sense. Basically, medicine has long recognized the importance of placebos, but never really understood, or still doesn't understand, the neuroscience as to why they work. And placebos are really just hitting one sense. I mean, you're swallowing a pill and being told it's going to help. Whereas ritual in various faith traditions, it touches all 5 senses most of the time. And more specifically, in some faiths, it's called liturgy. And in my particular tradition, sacrament, which means even more, has a more important meaning in the sense that it's not just a symbol, but also a source of healing. And so that, I use the term placebos because we're in a conference here where we're all like-minded. And we get out into the medical community and the religious community, and there's this distrust. It's still separate. And I think we have to talk in terms of placebo effects and things like that to get at least interest get started in it. So the question is, how do we compare these various senses and their impact? The sight, the largest brain activity, is really dedicated to the sight. And the smell is the strongest memory impact neurologically. Sound is can often lead us into a meditative state as a doorway to prayer. Touch is really the largest body organ, and taste is a synergy with smell quite often. And so the question is, why are we not taking advantage of the placebo effect of all 5 senses instead of just the one in the medical community? So I'd like to be able to go through each one of these, show an example in a religious setting, and then also the hospital setting to give the contrast. I think you'll recognize this. Most of these I took myself, not all of them. I didn't take the Sistine, not allowed to take it. It's the second most visited museum in the world next to the Louvre. And the one on the right is the Chartres Cathedral, famous stained glass window. So artistic sites are drawn on by religion quite often. Architectural sites are also drawn on. Church of the Holy Trinity in Germany, Bavaria, and Our Savior of the Spilled Precious Blood in St. Petersburg. Magnificent structures and meant to have an impact on us emotionally. Natural sites are also drawn in by faiths. This is the Thornbrown Chapel in Arkansas, which is all glass and open to the woods, and nature is brought in. And Christ in the Desert in New Mexico, it's the Benedictine monastery, the most remote monastery in the U.S. And the backdrop is cliffs and mountains, and as you look through the windows above the altar, there are 3 crosses on the top of the cliffs. Just the emotional impact is incredible. By comparison, I took this picture just a few weeks ago from one of the top-rated hospitals in the country. A friend of mine was in a hospital, and I took it from the window, and what was fortunate is it was dirty, and so you really couldn't see the air conditioning unit and the fire escape, the roof, and the other walls. Okay? I have to attest that I think things have improved because sanitary conditions don't allow fans in hospital rooms, but that used to be the case, okay? But I just took this a few weeks ago, so you can't tell me this is, I didn't take this one off of the internet. Ritual smells are very much a part of religious tradition. And in the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela in Spain, they have a incense boat that's the size of a human being. And I took this photo at the end of a mass where they started to get this thing swinging. And it swings up to each transept 100 feet or more. And it's absolutely incredible. Thank you, because the more people that are out there, the more I feel like this is
I'm missing a beautiful picture.
The funny part about this is it was practical. It's the terminus point of a pilgrimage that takes about a month to do, and there are a lot of people that continue to do it. And in the Middle Ages, they didn't shower very often, so the incense had actually other purposes. Now, in Santa Maria ad Martes in Rome, that is actually the first use of concrete by the Romans in a dome like that still exists. It's now a Catholic church, and on Pentecost, they pour rose petals through the roof, and there's a hole in the roof, and the light comes and hits those rose petals, so it's smell and sight. Hospital smells, not like the incense. And I thought, I don't want to take any photos of this, I better just resort to art. Okay. The Hustairs bedpan, 1994, oil and canvas, obviously trying to capture something that can't be, nor do we want to. Music sounds. In St. Peter's Basilica, Vatican, there's a magnificent organ, but that's really not that big. The Santiago de Compostela, the incense was thrown in, is even a more magnificent organ. And quite often, these sounds are melodic and repetitive, like chant, because it leads into a contemplative prayer state that can cause people to be taken away someplace else and enter them into prayer very easily. So it's not just the entertainment value, it's also a transcendence of the spirit. Hospital sounds. Couldn't capture that on a slide, but I think this helps. The rule of instrumentation, there are two main rules when you're instrumenting something. Number one is you don't overdo the alarms, because people will start ignoring them, number one. And number two, you have the alarms go to the person who is responsible to do something about them. So what do we do in a hospital? We have the patient be the first one to hear the alarms, okay? You know, and of course they're going, what is this, you know, and then the nurse runs in. Now, we have transmitted those to the nurse's station, but we still have them in the hospital room. I have no idea. I haven't figured this one out myself. Now, there's also a problem with this, because if an instrument fails, you don't recognize it necessarily. So, a case study, a lady had ovarian cancer and surgery, was being interrupted with sleep, so had started to get sleep deprivation and hallucinations. Hallucinations were attributed to the anesthesia. Well, I'm not sure it didn't have something to do also with the sleep deprivation caused by the alarms. And so she started to see bugs crawling up the wall. They prescribed an antipsychotic medication, and because the legal system doesn't allow them to have the rails on the bed up to restrain them, and yet even though she was on an antipsychotic drug, fell out of bed, and the alarm failed on the bed. And the solution to that was to have somebody stationed in there permanently, help her back in bed and have her stationed in there permanently to watch her, because they can't raise the sides of the bed. We've got legal situations involved here, we've got liturgical situations, we've got a lot of things. They discharged her from the hospital, and 2 days later she passed away. That was my wife, by the way. Healing touch. This is a photograph of Pope Francis embracing a man's head, and it's hard to tell that is a man's head. He has, I guess the term would be elephantitis, I don't know the technical term, but clearly nobody had ever touched this man. Never. been touched. And so to have somebody of that position touching meant something deep. And of course, in my tradition, the Catholic tradition, there's the anointing of the sacrament of the sick, in which case there's touch on the forehead and the palms with oil. So there is this indication that the oil is supposed to symbolically let the spirit or anybody that's wrestling with you, it started centuries ago when they were wrestling, they grease each other down so the opponent couldn't hold on to it. So the oil is symbolic, but it's also fragrance, and it's touching, it's soothing, done today. This is hospital touch. We don't have a clue of the psychic effect on that child later. We don't have a clue. And then in some of the Christian traditions, there's communion and receiving the host and the wine, which historians of the 2nd, 3rd century report that the 12 apostles believed there was a real presence of Christ. So it's very moving for patients, for people in the liturgical sense and sacramental sense. How do we transfer this to the hospital? Now, this is a little unfair. I mean, we've made major strides in making medicine taste better, but psychologically, is it there? I don't think so. So this is a little bit over dramatized, I have to admit. So the question is, this talk is not a call for another academic research paper. This is a call for implementing lessons learned. We've had 2 millennia of lessons learned, and only 2 centuries of having forgotten those lessons. I was at the Malta conference where Harold Koenig, who was one of the speakers, gave a talk, and the heart of the talk was in what he said, and I'll try to not quote it perfectly, but that the 200-year experiment of separating religion and spirituality has failed. And we need to reunite them again, which is where they were before. Medicine and spirituality, I'm sorry. So, what lessons have we learned? Well, sight, there might be art or LCD screens in ceilings or windows, especially if you don't clean the windows. But the question is, economic impact, et cetera. Well, what's the cost, et cetera. But most of the time they're spent on their back looking up at a ceiling. So, do you put an existing LCD screen that rotates up to the ceiling so you don't have to duplicate it? And by the way, these are thoughts, ideas that aren't all inclusive. I'm just tossing some things out. Smell, aromatherapy in rooms. Now I realize that there are restrictions on sanitary conditions, etc. But have we really looked into that? Sound, music, Gregorian chant, or basically melodic, repetitive type music, or music that the patient can choose, and then attack the remote alarm concept a little bit more. Get a handle on that, because we're not really addressing it. So one is an addition, the other is a subtraction. Touch, massage therapy. Now I realize some of that's done already. It can be very expensive, not available to all patients or whatever, but there are ways that this could be done without a lot of cost or intrusion and still be optional to the patient. It might be just a hand massage or a temple. But touch, again, Taste. I added the chocolate, sorry. Now, this could be a problem in a hospital. You've got dietary needs. Patients will start saying, well, I'll take that, and pretty soon you're in trouble. But there have to be ways of dealing with this. There are got to be ways of dealing with this. Give more options. And again, these are just examples with more examples and ideas generated from a project management team. So this kind of draws us into how do we implement?
You're doing great.
Okay.
You have about 3 minutes.
To
To be concrete, 3 minutes.
Project management. Now, when you're building a project management team on a new hospital or any project, there are team members that are in the beginning of a project to the end. You have cost estimator, you got engineering manager, construction manager. In churches, there is such a thing as a liturgical architect. Why aren't we using this in hospitals when we're building a new hospital? And that liturgical architect would give ideas of that would cover some of these 5 senses. Okay. And an interfaith chaplain. Now, I don't know, I'll be honest with you, I don't know, I'm almost sure there's no liturgical architect on these project management teams, but I don't think, there might be an interfaith chaplain on the team. If there isn't, the argument I can imagine would be, well, what has he got to do with this? Well, we just went through lessons learned. What are we going to do to implement them? And what ideas did I not list here that project management team would come up with? So a normal project goes through various phases: a feasibility study, preliminary engineering, detail engineering, site construction, and then startup and operation. And you have that project management team right from the beginning. So when ideas are discussed and are discussed at this level, cost is estimated, and you decide whether there's an easier way to do it, or maybe just clean the windows. Is it possible?
Crazy.
No, we don't want to clean the windows. But the concept here would be you get the right team members as part of the team, which they're not normally right now. Now, there are 2 projects going on now in Houston. One is the Methodist Hospital expansion, $2 billion, 2014 to 2017. These are published. And the other is St. Luke's Hospital purchased and modernization, $2 billion, 2014 plus. These are within, what, an eighth of a mile of each other, even shorter, closer than that. This was just purchased by Catholic Health Initiatives. Now, I'm not saying anything about these project management teams. I have not talked to them. I might take this video back and show it to them, and we can talk about it then. But the point is that this is the stage at which you want to start thinking about how you implement these things so that they're not just an academic research project.
Okay.